In past forums, candidates have cited implicit bias training as a way to reduce systemic racism in city institutions. While training is valuable for addressing interpersonal racism, it does little to address institutional racism that arises from formal and informal policies, procedures, and practices. Please name two specific policies, procedures, or practices that you would champion to address institutional racism. And given the documented history of plans that fail to translate into action, please outline the accountability framework that would support your two policies.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to participate in what I consider to be a vital conversation this evening. It's a real honor to be here and discuss how we can bring real change to Melrose and making it a community that works for everybody. I'm a proud Latino and son of a Mexican immigrant who has experienced racism firsthand since I was a young child, with a front row seat to what racism actually looks and feels like. When it happens, everybody suffers. That lived narrative has always driven me in how I approach issues of race. It reminds me that we must build and strengthen systems where every person is seen and valued and validated and included for exactly who they are and the world they bring with them. Training and awareness, although important, is when it's isolated unto itself, rarely comes with measures of accountability that turn into real action. I believe we have to be much more active in terms of the actual measures we take to change policies and practices that shape people's everyday lives. In Melrose, I see two areas where we can make real tangible progress in education and procurement specifically, but I also want to second what Dionisio said in regarding to CDFIs and driving greater housing equity. I could not be happier to hear that out of a candidate for office in Melrose. In education, representation matters. I truly believe that every child should see themselves reflected in their teachers and in their curriculum. And I think a diverse teaching workforce would help reduce the racial disparities we see in student discipline in Melrose. I would champion a diversity focused recruitment and retention initiative to build pipelines for educators from underrepresented backgrounds, including partnerships with local colleges, historically black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, and professional development networks such as the He Is Me Institute and the Massachusetts Partnership for Diversity in Education. As it relates to procurement, I would advocate for a supplier diversity policy similar to that of the federal government and the state level supplier diversity program in Massachusetts. This sets measurable goals for awarding contracts for NMSDC certified minority-owned enterprises. And currently, many of these companies face incredibly high barriers that are often insurmountable in navigating the bidding process or breaking into established networks. I know this because I've worked with several of them over the course of my career. And opening these doors advances equity and strengthens our local economy as well. But like I was saying earlier, policies only matter if they're tracked and enforced. And as people who followed my candidacy for no more than a hot minute, probably know that I think talk is pretty cheap when the results don't follow suit, which has been sorely lacking in Melrose. And I would propose a public online equity dashboard that reports annually on hiring, retention, and procurement goals. Residents would be able to see real-time results for themselves. And additionally, I would pair this dashboard with an annual review session where leaders publicly discuss progress, identify obstacles, and adjust strategies as needed. As my own lived experience has taught me, fairness doesn't just happen by accident or by magic. It happens when leaders are intentional, transparent, and willing to do the hard work of change, not just talk about it. That's the commitment I would bring to the council, to make Melrose not just welcoming in words, but equitable in practice with measurable results.
Thank you. You'll now spotlight Devin Romano. You're in the spotlight.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Devin Romano, and I have the great pleasure, the great honor of representing Ward 7 on the Melrose City Council for the last year and a half. I'm really appreciative of the breadth and depth of suggestions here tonight, and I do hope that they continue on. In this moment of federal intransigence and outright antagonism, cities are increasingly pressured to tackle big systemic issues like climate change and wealth gaps and institutional racism. And I do a lot of this work in my day job. I work for a national nonprofit called Fuse Core, and our job is to help narrow racial wealth gaps in cities all over the United States. And last year, I wrangled a $6 million grant through an organization, Living Cities, to help launch 30 new pilot programs in 15 cities to help build housing, a revolving loan fund for a down payment assistance program, help build more affordable housing through a land bank, increase the flow of CDFI capital in Louisville, Kentucky, help to build advanced manufacturing, workforce pipelines in Austin. So really trying to look at a bunch of different ways we can narrow wealth gaps in these communities. And that can be a lot easier in cities where you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people living in them. So oftentimes we are trying to hyper focus on filling potholes and hiring teachers, and that is alluring and important work, and oftentimes a signal to our constituents that we are, in fact, capable of higher order responsibility. So I actually see that baseline physical infrastructure work as a necessary predicate to working on all the very real challenges that we're talking about today. So just real quickly, a couple of things that really resonated with me. Number one, since homeownership is one of the biggest drivers of intergenerational wealth, as anyone who's read The Color of Law, it's an excellent book in city government and institutional racism. We can't regulate banks directly, but we can convene, we can educate, we can benchmark. And so I think this would require collaboration with not only the administration, but perhaps the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, community development organizations, building a regular event that we do education work on pathways to homeownership, on access to capital, on figuring out ways we can work through lending to increase equity in how people can get into the home ownership market. Because as Dion rightly said, really it's not an access to housing; it's an access to capital. Different kind of opportunity. The second was, I do a lot of talent and hiring and recruiting in every single major metropolitan area in the country, and I see how much procurement matters. Living Cities ran a great city accelerator on this, which gives a whole host of policy recommendations that I think are worthy of our consideration in terms of how we help small businesses build wealth in our community and do that procurement, but then also making sure that our residents see themselves in the people who work here, and making sure that we evaluate every part of the hiring process, how we post jobs, how we do background checks. All of that is deeply important. And then lastly, building on my colleague, Councillor Jamaluddin's recommendation, we get budget memos in every single department that we evaluate budgets every single year. And I think adding sub-bullets on what are the racial equity implications or economic equity implications to every single expenditure we make to introduce that regularly into the conversation. So thanks so much.